Hello, everyone. I'm Jean-Claude Beyond Mystic, and welcome to this evening's special report. Tonight, we are looking at Trudeau's prorogation challenge at the federal court here in Canada. And with me to discuss this matter, of course, is the one and only, the legend, Viva Frei. You can find him on his Twitter here at the Viva Frei, on YouTube and Rumble at Viva Frei, and also at vivabarneslaw.locals.com.
What do
Viva,
you? What's this
welcome to the
magic?
show. Happy New Year's. How are you?
Thank you. Happy New Year. What's that magic that you're doing with toggling so easily between tabs?
You and I have to talk, man.
Someone told me I might need to learn this technique. That's very, very cool.
Okay.
Well, I've only been doing this for 6 years now.
I know. I've been watching you quite some time, and you and I have crossed paths many times. But first, before we get into all that, welcome everyone joining us here. We are triple casting tonight on YouTube, X, and also on Rumble. We're going to try to stay civil so that we can leave this YouTube video up and running tonight. But Viva, by all means, if you think we need to get into some difficult language, let me know and I'll drop the YouTube.
Forget it.
First of all, Happy New Year, Viva. How are you doing? What's new with you, man?
Nothing. I mean, back in the sunny state of Florida, went for a bike ride. I was telling you before we went live, I saw a bobcat, deer, a massive alligator, and it was like it's like God's playground out in the back by the Everglades. But no, back in the States and down here just in time for all the madness.
Absolutely madness. It is. Same thing here in Ottawa. It's a little bit freezing. No alligators for sure. And we have the political crisis, so to speak, here of our generation. Now, before we get into all of that, we, of course, want to look at this challenge here of the prorogation of Mr. Trudeau and whether or not we can force an election or maybe use some of the jurisprudence and common law that was set in 2019 in the UK against Boris Johnson here with Trudeau's prorogation. But before we get into all that, I wanted to share with the audience members that you and I have crossed paths so many times during the Freedom Convoy. And here we are exactly 3 years almost to the date to all of this stuff.
Would you look at all those extremists? That Russian funded madness right there.
Fringe minority people out there, and of course the Nazi flag supporters, which apparently was a liberal staffer working in a lobbying firm. But why digress? We shouldn't get into that too much here tonight. The Rouleau Commission, they really want to look at that evidence. Viva, first of all, how is this demarcation for you in your live streaming audience members, in your history here, what you were doing? Why was this so important for you to be there? You were there almost every day. We were crossing paths on the street here, just on Wellington Street. How did this change your life here, this Freedom Convoy situation? How you move forward?
Well, nobody knew what it was going to spiral into. I just remember it was, people think people do things for clicks and for views, but like when that started, it was just a question of not even exposing, just seeing for myself what was going on down there. Because when I was up at, it was a Project Veritas event in Florida, oddly enough, I had come down. And then everyone's DMing me saying, Viva, why aren't you in Ottawa? You got to see what's going on there. And I watch on the news and, you see the flag. Let me just turn that off because it's going to get annoying otherwise. You see the news about the swastika flag, and you hear all this. It's like, okay, if that's what it is, I want to see it for myself. I'm being told by everybody that's not at all what's going on. And so then I go down there. I had started live streams, but just once a week with Robert Barnes, I think by that time. Yes, certainly by that time. Right. Yeah. And my content was still short format content, do a highly edited car vlog. And people said, no, go down and look at this. And I went down, and then I went down again. And then, after 4 or 5 days, there were 50,000 people watching some schnook walk around Ottawa all day, and had no idea what it was going to turn into. But then, then it also, just as a style change, it drew me into live streaming where you can cover more than one subject at a time. And that's where the trajectory of my content went after that. But that, as far as a moment goes in time, nobody knew that it was going to turn into what it turned into. And it was both, the most inspiring thing ever and among the most depressing ends ever, because I said, oh yeah, go for it, please.
I'd like to add to that too. The depressing part of that for me was watching what I thought was fair arbiter of the truth news media completely misrepresenting the situation. Now, you and I have been following politics for a long time in most of our careers, and we understand that different news outlets here in Canada have different slants. Some are more liberal, some are more conservative. But when it came to the Freedom Convoy, when it came to the pandemic, it was suddenly hard propaganda, the opposite of reality. And I went there on Parliament Hill thinking, oh my God, these terrorists are here, the swastika holding people. And what I saw was people singing Kumbaya. I saw these bouncy castles with children. I'm like, this is not being reported correctly. And I had to mourn the fact that the media I thought was maybe a little bit biased was a lot more biased than I thought. What was your take on that?
I haven't always been politically aware. I mean, I've said it on my channel. Everybody knows I voted for Trudeau in 2015 because I was just, I don't even know what the word is, like not even superficially involved in politics, not at all. I didn't watch the news. I was too busy, you know, family, lawyer, you're working day in, day out. You think, you don't even know that you don't know what you don't know. And you just are superficial, surface level understanding of the world. But I only started to understand what defund the CBC meant towards 2018, 2019. I had heard it for years. The conservatives were big, bad censorship bunnies, and they wanted to defund the CBC, and it's going to kill journalism. And yet I didn't understand it until I understood it. And then when I understood it, and you say like, holy crap, it's not that they have just now turned evil. They've always been like this to some degree or another. And when I got down to Ottawa and saw, you know, what they called a racist, a right-wing extremist protest. And the first thing I saw when I got down there, I don't want to mix up the timeline. I ran into Big Bear, the native guy from Alberta. The first down there, I saw that, you know, they were doing a dance at the park. It was sort of off of Wellington. And then, you know, I'm seeing people who I'm seeing minorities of all walks of life. I'm seeing, not that I care about sexual orientation, but I'm seeing people flying gay pride flags within the protest. And the only intolerance I ever saw was when you crossed over into the counter protesters. But once you understood, or once I fully understood the degree to which the state funded, federally funded media was lying, and then you have to assume like it wasn't the first time, and they've always been doing it to some degree or another, but maybe they've gotten a little bit more desperate as their cling to truth and narrative fell. But I have to look back at everything and say they were always as big liars then as I know they are now, and I have to reassess everything I thought I ever knew accordingly.
Bingo. Yeah, it was a rude awakening for me as well. And I have to say, when I was reporting there live, there were a few RCMP members who had just recently quit their details because they didn't agree with the policies here in Canada and where Justin Trudeau were going. And they had offered to kind of give me some security during these convoys. I wasn't sure what to expect. And at some point, I was interviewing this young lady here who was talking about if you only felt the love in Ottawa on this particular day, you wouldn't feel the fear that the mainstream media was propagating. That was a famous clip for some of my reporting there. But while I was reporting with this person, I had this mob of men coming at me, and they were angry, and they were intercepted by the RCMP guys who were giving me cover, and they thought I was CBC or CBC.
Yeah. Well, you look a little too clean cut to be independent. I'm joking.
Right.
But well, you know, yes. Even that said, you know, like the people who are heckling the CBC, CNN, tough noogies. I mean, you guys are pathological liars. And if the worst that happens to you is you get heckled, you got to suck it up and deal with it. You're asses, and the world knows it now.
Yeah. So my cover said, no, he's a YouTuber, he's a truther. And they're like, oh, okay, he's cool. All right, cool. You know, so it was
Jean-Claude, wasn't it amazing? Like I've never felt safer walking downtown in Ottawa ever in my life, and I would never walk there at night ever again. Like I went back 2 years later, and it was like going through a sort of California, but colder. Ottawa had never been cleaner. It had never been safer. It had never been more jovial. And once I was down there for one day, and I'm like, holy crap, nobody's pissing on the war monument. Nobody's desecrating the Terry Fox Memorial. Nobody's smashing windows and spray painting and vandalizing. It was the most joy. Do you remember, Trista Sook? I don't know if you remember her. She's the one I ran into the first day I got there. A young woman who came out just to sing. She's walking around with a guitar. And I for a second thought she might have just been a little loopy, like, you know, she's walking around, I just want to play guitar. And then she started singing, and it was the most beautiful song ever. She then went on to Canada's Got Talent. The bottom line, it was people who were there. They wanted to see other people, see other smiles, hug other people, and live free like God intended us to.
It was absolutely beautiful. A big demarcation in my life too, and it did change the course of this channel. Originally, I wanted to do esoteric kind of content, like a mystery school of sorts, and then I realized we have a bigger fight at hand here. It's censorship, and it's also this dictatorship and this movement towards totalitarianism that we're in. And I realized, okay, this is what we really need to focus on now before we get to the other side of this, where we can have the humanity, the freedoms that we all wish we have today. So Viva, a big thank you again for being on the show here today. Thank you for that quick intro and that drive down memory lane here of the Freedom Convoy. And I have to say, on behalf of the audience too, a lot of people were watching you at the time too and telling me how they were inspired by what you were doing, and that they were encouraged also to start their own YouTube channels and to start speaking out about all of this tyranny. So you've done such a great job on that front. Viva. I have to say thank you.
Fortuitous accidents, and thank you. But I just remember with W5 when they ran something of a small hit piece on me later. They said Viva Frei, who provides an unfiltered view of the say, you're damn right it should be unfiltered. But nobody wants your filtered narrative telling them how to interpret reality. Here it is. I'll tell you what I think, because we're walking around for 6 hours a day. But this is the unfiltered reality. Now make with it what you think is truth.
Right, exactly. And we suffered the frostbite to go with it. I remember having to change all those batteries on my cell phone.
It was that was the funniest thing. Also, was like I've never done this. I go down with my phone, and like people, and my phone's going dead after like 45 minutes to an hour. Then people start coming and giving me batteries. I still have a bunch of the batteries.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah, it was the great. And then when people found out that I liked Red Bull, they would periodically like run into me and give me a Red Bull. It was glorious. And then when it ended with those flashbangs and RCMP beating up veterans. I mean, it was actually, it was a black pill. And then I thought the white pill was going to be the Rouleau Commission declaring it unlawful. But then that was part 2 of the black pill. And now Justin Trudeau's resigning, and that's still, or it announces his intention to resign after they hold robust national leadership elections. So there's no white pill at this point, because the damage is done, but it's still a fun fight to wage every day.
Absolutely, and that's probably the reason you haven't cut your hair yet. Is that right?
I've gone superficially attached to my hair. It's terrible, but I'll have the rest. Well, I'm going to have the rest of my life to be bald. So like, why cut it? Why cut it while I have it?
I'm totally with you.
All right, there's nothing wrong with being bald, people. My father, after I think 70 years, finally ended up losing a lot of his hair, but it's here. I'll keep it for a bit.
Me too. I wish I could keep it a little bit longer if I can. All right, let's get into the crux of all of this stuff. The Toronto Sun here was reporting, I sort of quit, and this is what Viva was alluding to here just a moment ago. Trudeau didn't actually resign. If you listen to his speech very carefully, and in politics, of course, words are very important. He said, I intend to resign after this leadership race. We still don't have the procedures and the rules for this leadership race, although the party is meeting here in the last couple of days. Trudeau stepped out of the caucus meeting yesterday that was scheduled for 4 or 5 hours, only after 30 minutes. Presumably things were not going too well for him there yesterday, but yes, indeed, he's intending to resign. Now, for all intents and purposes, Viva, this guy is very long past his expiry date. He's got scandal after scandal after scandal, which in Canadian politics, many would have fallen way, way, way faster before him. But still, when you think that Trudeau, Chrétien was the Teflon man, I'm not sure which adjective to give Trudeau here, because he's outlasted all of those guys in terms of scandals at the very least. Now, people are saying that he's not going and that he's maybe still clinging to power. We're hearing that yet now. We had in the last couple of months, the caucus come out. There were 30 or 40 people of them now also jumping on the bandwagon, asking for his resignation. But still, we're here today and it's not done. Do you think that he really intends? Let me ask you, I know this is conjecture on your part. Does he really intend to resign right now, or he's stalling for something else? Let's start.
The only reason he's stalling in any way is to give the Liberals a little more time to right the ship. He's done for. There's 2 things. When someone comes out and says, I'm resigning, fine. Once there's a race and there's a replacement, then I'm resigning. I mean, it's as good as a resignation. I know that people are saying technically he could have resigned immediately. Liberal caucus would then appoint an interim leader, and then they would hold their robust leadership races. The issue is, or at least the main point is, it's over. It's crumbling. He announce your intention to resign. He's stated to the world he's infighting. He doesn't have the support of his own party. And so the idea that it's not really a resignation because he's prorogued parliament, and so technically he's going to be the leader while government is not in session. What he's done by doing it this way is not delayed his own official booting from the party. He's bought 3 months. He's bought 3 months of the ability to delay and maybe hope people forget, and I'd say arguably find another leader. So it's he could have left. They appointed interim leader. They hold their leadership race. and then they find a replacement, fine. I think what he's trying to do is just, to some extent, get past a certain threshold, from what I understand, for, what's the word, pension maturing for some people. And that's it. Some people are saying, look, his dad did the same thing back in 78 when his dad said he was going to resign as leader from the Liberal Party. Then the Clark government fell. And then
there are a lot of parallels.
Well, there's a lot of parallels, but there's material differences in that they weren't the government and he wasn't being booted out by his party. And they weren't already the government. The whole point is that he has become detested to the point where it's dysfunctional within the government. There is internal jockeying or fighting right now. I think when Chrystia Freeland resigned, it was a spitting in his face publicly and covering her own butt to run for the leadership. So he's done, but the bottom line is it doesn't matter. He's sort of the figurehead of this globalist regime that is the Liberal Party, and to an equal extent the NDP. So whether it's him that's the leader or Chrystia Freeland or Mark Carney, it changes nothing as far as the nature of the Liberal Party goes. But yeah, technically he could have been out and he could have resigned and gallant, run off into the sunset, and they'd appoint an interim leader. They didn't. So instead,
he could have had his metaphorical walk in the snow like his father did.
Yeah, but I'm just thinking, like, from his own, the sinister conspiracy here is not going to be how he retains power. It's only going to be whether or not they hope to sabotage the Conservatives in the interim, try to find a replacement who's going to be something of a
contender against Pierre Poilievre.
Yeah, and try to minimize the damage that he's done to the Liberals. Or some people are really saying, okay, he's going to delay. Then he's not going to resign. In the interim, he's going to form some sort of coalition government with Jagmeet Singh and the NDP. But I think all of those bridges are burnt. And then bottom line, okay, so even if he does it, so they stay in power until September, October. Right. They have to call an election then anyhow by law. If you want to get conspiratorial, he stays in power until March. Something terrible happens and they have to suspend elections and he can't appoint the replacement because there's been martial law declared, whatever. You can go down that path, but at the end of the day, what difference does it make if it's Chrystia Freeland or Justin Trudeau, who is the leader of the party? The important thing is to get those damn federal elections ASAP. And the only thing that he's done, that's the thought that I almost forgot, is by proroguing Parliament, he's made it impossible to submit and accept a motion for a non-confidence motion. So until they reconvene government, then technically they can't call a new election. I mean, that's what the sinister thing that he might have done, is bought another 3 months where they can't trigger a non-confidence vote. Right.
And that presumably now would come a couple of days after March 24, which is the prorogation date that the governor general has.
And I'm not an constitutional expert. I learn as I go and I learn from my own mistakes, but even I don't know what the delay would be or the timeline would be if there's a non-confidence motion that's passed. I don't know what the time frame would be within which to hold the next election. But bottom line, convenient for Jagmeet Singh and a bunch of others, from what I understand, they have successfully gotten past the point of maturing their federal pension. So next election comes around when Jagmeet is booted out. At least he's going to be set for life with taxpayer dollar support.
So we're going to get into this federal court challenge that could change the direction of the conversation we're having now. But before I do that, I wanted to have your take on this video here, interview between Rosie Barton at the CBC and Chantal Hébert. Chantal here, she's been covering politics for a long time. You've been watching her. To some extent, she has been emotional on camera before. I remember the first election of Donald Trump where she had tears to her eyes. But in this particular one, there seems to be something else in an underlayer behind what she's saying. So I want to play that clip for you if you haven't heard it. Then I want to come back to ask, maybe perhaps she knows something we do not hear. And this is why she's maybe more emotional than usual. So let's play this clip and come back for commentary.
We'll talk about an election in the next block, but how does he leave the party?
I mean, I've watched prime ministers resign late in the game before, but in this particular case and in these circumstances, Justin Trudeau is leaving his party for sure, his caucus for sure, but also the country in a bad place. And I'm not saying that because liberal policies. I'm saying that because on January 20th, Donald Trump is going to become president. And we will be in the middle of turmoil, Parliament not sitting, leadership campaign, which is probably the worst possible time. And there is no reference point for how bad this could be. But it is bad to have waited so long and then to leave this to a process still undefined. until at least the end of March, possibly with an election, which basically means we would spend the next 6 months in some political uncertainty. That is leaving the country in a bad place.
So what do you make of her right now and what she's saying? On top of looking at the obvious, okay, there's an incoming threat of President Trump and the so-called tariffs and now maybe the annexation of Canada. Is she alluding to something else here when she says the situation is really dire and perhaps there's no precedent for where we're at right now? What do you think she's getting at?
I try to be sinister. I think the most useful thing could be for them to not be sitting when Trump comes into power. I mean, what are the threats that Trump has? I'm not sure if she's going from the angle that she's scared of Trump and thinks Trump is a danger, or they won't be able to properly negotiate to Canada's best interest. The talk about annexing Canada as the 51st state, I think, is not a joke, but I think it's a negotiation tactic to remind Canada who's the big brother and who's the strong one in this relationship. I think it's intended to soften up Canada to negotiations or discussions on tariffs, energy, and other stuff. I don't think Trump doesn't want Canada, and there's probably a lot of political demographic in Canada that Trump doesn't want in America anyhow, in MAGA Trump. But what are the threats? They're talking about a tariff war, which I don't know that's going to hit a fevered pitch on January 20th.
Well, originally, let's just backtrack before you go too far. Originally, when Trump proposed these 25% tariffs, it's because, and again, the mainstream news buried the lead on this. It was because, in his opinion, we had terrorists that were coming into Canada, crossing our border into the United States, and he was asking Trudeau and his government to fix that border, or else the 25% tariffs. It had nothing to do at that point with acquiring Canada. And of course, the mainstream news completely buried the lead on the fact that, hey, we have terrorists in our country crossing the border. They made it look like Trump was really mean and irresponsible for trying to suddenly impose these tariffs. Go ahead.
I don't know how fast, I mean, if you can even find the clip, but it was shortly thereafter that Trudeau comes out and says, yeah, we're going to fix up the border, tighten up the border. And I think your audience probably knows, but
yes, I think Leblanc announced this $1.3 billion maybe a week later to fix some of the concerns that Trump had requested of them when they went to Mar-a-Lago the week prior. So there seems to already be movement on that. Exactly.
It was something like 10 times the amount of what's the word, interceptions of people on terror watch lists coming from Canada to the U.S. versus Mexico to the U.S. And so, look, I don't know what she's freaking out. Well, I'll see. I want to see her get emotional. Not that I like seeing people cry, but but it's so freaking nuts. The level of Canadian, and I'm saying this, and I'm not saying this to be mean. Those who are brainwashed in Canada, the level of brainwashing to think that Trump is some sort of big bad boogeyman, existential threat to America, it blows my mind every time I come back that people hate Trump in Canada. And they don't even know why. And then you just ask them. And these are like some of my family members, not my immediate, but let's say, and I say like, oh, that's why do you think he's a monster? And they have there's no good excuse, but they've been so bloody brainwashed by Trudeau's federally funded propaganda media and bailed out media. It was
TDS, Trump derangement syndrome, orange man bad. That's all they got.
But it's so wild. Like once you appreciate the degree to which the media controls thought through repetition and just people don't appreciate it. But no, Trump coming into power, oddly enough, is the best thing that could happen for Canada. The only thing that it might be revealing right now is, in fact, Canada's unholy ties with China and India. And
I'll get your thoughts in on that, because I do have that on slide deck, the foreign interference stuff, which we have yet to dig to the bottom to here in Canada. And presumably here, if the Liberal Party is going to go through a nomination race and there's still foreign interference, wouldn't the Liberal Party want to get down to that before they get into this leadership?
I happen to think, well, I think we all know it depends on proportion, but the foreign interference, Chinese infiltration affects all parties except for one. I'd say all parties. It affects the big parties. It doesn't affect the PPC, just as a matter of fact. But I don't think the Conservatives are any more eager to get to the bottom of that than the Liberals. They might be less culpable in terms of numbers. But
you might be correct. You might be correct.
Yeah. I mean, and that's why I also think Trudeau proroguing Parliament. You don't hear much conservative screaming about it. Like nobody seems to really care that.
Well, we'll get into that, because so far the Conservatives are not backing this motion to the federal court about prorogation and challenging Trudeau's prorogation. So far, anyways, as of today, the recording here, I haven't seen any of them
Well,
jump in.
flesh that out for me. Is there, because I like this would be new to me. Is there a way to insist on submitting and addressing a non-confidence motion while government has been prorogued? Because my understanding
No.
was that
No.
suspends the ability to do it, so they can't
Right.
even call a non-confidence until government reconvenes.
No, but what they can do, similar to what they did to Boris Johnson in 2019, was to make a case to the federal court to say that the prorogation does not fall under the constitutional rules of why prorogation should be used, and therefore that prorogation could be annulled, having the House now having to sit at its earliest convenience to where now they could face a no confidence vote. And this is what has been presented here by the Justice Center for Constitutional Freedoms. So let's play part of that clip. Then let's get into that. Let me just.
Well, hold on. I want to see that journalist freak out. I want to see the meltdown. Does she cry? I didn't see the whole thing.
Well, visibly. Well, there's a second part of it too, and also CBC kind of cut some of her commentary, so they cut her mic at some point. So I'm like, what was she doing there that the CBC didn't want to hear? There's more to that story.
No, but it's amazing. I was trying to figure out. I don't know who Chantal Labert is, or at least I didn't know until googling it. But trying to figure out if she's friend or foe. But they are hell bent on turning Trump into a boogeyman. It's once one appreciates that they demonize the good and lionize the bad, and that's why you got like Joe Biden giving medals of freedom to Hillary. So they lionize the evil and demonize the good. Once you understand that, you'll understand who Trump is, and they know it. That's why they have to do it.
Right. And then you understand how things really work. So let's hear part of the case here and how it's being described. So let me see if I can bring that forward here. So let's change.
I don't think there's a way to annul a prorogation, but I say that knowing that I don't.
Like I said, there's precedents now in the UK, and for all intents and purposes, we are under the same Westminster rules of Parliament, and so that jurisprudence or that common law would apply here. This is what he's making as a case. So let's listen very carefully to what he says, and we'll come back to some more commentary
in the United Kingdom.
Can you hear that? Okay, Viva?
Yep, perfect.
Okay.
He attempted to prorogue Parliament for 5 weeks out of 8, and the timing was very, very tricky because, as you guys may recall, that was when the Brexit was coming, and they needed to have an agreement with the European Union about how to exit from the EU. And if they didn't, there could be a hard exit, and it would have been very catastrophic economically, politically, for the UK and maybe for the EU. So anyway, Prime Minister Johnson at the time, decided anyway to prorogue Parliament for 5 weeks of the 8 remaining weeks leading up to the Brexit. And essentially, he wanted to avoid scrutiny from Parliament. He wanted to avoid the tough questions, avoid all of the mess in the House of Commons that was happening at the time. And so ultimately, this led to a challenge like the one that we've brought today. And the Supreme Court of the United Kingdom ruled unanimously, 11 votes to 0, that the exercise of the prorogation power by Prime Minister Johnson to advise, at that point, the Queen to prorogue was unlawful. And essentially what the Supreme Court of the UK said at that point was that you can't, in the course of proroguing, you can't frustrate or prevent the ability of Parliament to oversee the government, to do its job, which is to oversee the government, to supervise the government. Because as we all know, it's Parliament that is the supreme body in a Western parliamentary system. It's Parliament, not the government. It's Parliament as an entire body that is actually the supreme body of the country. So in any event, that's what we're saying happened in this case. We are suggesting that, like what happened in the UK when Prime Minister Johnson, did what he did to really frustrate the will of Parliament to supervise the government, we're suggesting in the same vein that in this particular case, the Prime Minister has prorogued Parliament in order to really gain some political advantage here. He has given us his reasons, as you all know from yesterday's press conference. The reasons are to reset, not legislative resetting, but to reset the tone,
right,
or the acrimony that he's been seeing in the House. Well, there's a way to do that. It's called have an election.
Okay, we'll leave it at that for now. And I want to share with the audience members the actual article that came out after the Supreme Court ruling here against Johnson in 2019. The links to that are in the description box below. And if you want to follow also and get more details on this motion, you can go to Justice Center or gccf.ca here to find the motion. And you can actually find the court application there. So there's a couple of questions. And now, in terms of procedure, and I know you're not a constitutional lawyer and neither am I, it does feel like this could apply to this situation. Now, where there might be a caveat is to the applicants. So far, we have 2 applicants to this motion, and they're not parliamentary people. So I'm questioning whether or not our court will want to listen to this case, or whether or not these people actually have standing in the matter. What are your thoughts on this here, too? Having seen in the last couple of years, even Trump having issues finding standing in his own election interference cases, and of course, seeing the results of the Trudeau Commission here on the Freedom Convoy and the invoking of the Emergencies Act, do these people have a chance here moving forward with this motion? Your first interpretation, Viva.
Jean-Claude, do you remember? I can share a screen here, right? I don't know if you can bring this.
Yeah,
You don't need to play it. I just remembered as you're talking, I covered this was back the first time when I was getting not even learning things that I probably should have known. When they prorogued Parliament, and I remember saying back in the day when it was unanimous. I remember this lady. Let me see, what is this the part?
The first question is whether the lawfulness of the Prime Minister's advice to Her Majesty is justiciable.
And the court determined, citing a decision. Okay, we'll bring that out. So the bottom line, I remember now the question, and it was unanimous. And I remember that judge saying, "We have unanimously decided this," because back in the day, it was the political will of their system to oppose Brexit and to do anything they could to frustrate the ability to follow through on Brexit. And so They found a legal way and a legal means to do it. I'm just trying to think, look, there's a precedent. They can get away with standing. I forget. I don't remember who the petitioner was when they tried to oppose the prorogation of Parliament when Boris Johnson did it. Oh, that brings back some memories. I mean, when you are entering the realm of politicized court systems and motivated reasoning, you have to say, if we're arguing in reverse, does the court system want an election or does it not? And if it doesn't, how are they going to get there? They'll deny standing. They'll say,
hold on that thought. Right now, what we've been seeing for the last year is a split in the Liberal faction. So that would include the people, the card-carrying members, the people in the party, the people in the caucus and the backbenches, but also perhaps the court system. The Liberal appointed court people also are trying to save this country. And when I say save this country, they're trying to save this Liberal Party from burning down to the ground, right? So they're maybe trying to save this 20%, their baseline here in Canada, or saving the furniture, so to speak. So what we've been seeing in the last couple of months is within the party, them trying to push Trudeau out. So it could very well be that some judges, and I'm not sure how they're going to appoint a judge to this particular motion moving forward, that they might be sympathetic to those Liberal factions that are trying to get rid of Trudeau faster as to save the Liberal Party moving forward here to come back and fight again, maybe in the next 4 years.
Yeah, I don't know which way it would. If you wanted to help the Liberals, I don't know which way it would help them more. I'm trying to think of I know that there were some questionable prorogations of Parliament in Canadian history. I have to go. I remember coming across those back in the day, but they're not fresh in my memory. Bottom line, I don't know that they're, even if they're going to have to decide, is there standing? Is it a justiciable question? Is it, and was the authority exercised improperly? And within what time frame? I mean, the government's, the session's going to have come back by the time they would adjudicate on this. If they come in on a provisional or provisional injunction in order to reconvene government, and then they're going to say, well, what's the prejudice if you don't? I'll bet money that it doesn't go anywhere, because even for it to go somewhere, by the time it goes somewhere, we'll be halfway through the prorogation or back to when government's going to reconvene. But they showed a lot of deference. It was not a court system; it was the commission. They've typically showed deference to Trudeau, and I don't know which way it hurts more.
Yeah.
This guy, Commissioner Rouleau, not related to Justin Trudeau, people, but there was someone with a Rouleau last name in the family. The federal courts have been deferential to the feds, throughout COVID. I don't think it goes anywhere, but at the end of the day, what I don't know that it makes much of a difference.
Okay. Well, if they went on an emergency basis and the case was heard, and a decision was made promptly, as you said here, and some of the precedents that was set in the UK, we could presumably within the next 2 or 3 weeks have a court order to say that, hey, the prorogation is null and void, and that the House has to resume seating in the shortest order, which would again maybe a week later present an opportunity here for a non-confidence vote. So that still brings us maybe early February if we're lucky. So that's still a month and a half before what is currently set on the books for March 24th as the end of the prorogation date. So this is very nebulous, but my question here is why, seeing as this has been presented now for the last 2 days, have the Conservative Party not jumped on this? Now, if you've been watching Michel Rempel, Pierre Poilievre, they've been all making the rounds in the last couple of weeks, suggesting that Canadians should be writing to their MPs, to their Governor General to ask for an election. Here's a legal means by which they can do that right now, other than just kicking, scream, and piss outside the tent that Trudeau has prorogued the House. This could be a venue for them to actually make that happen, yet they haven't listed themselves as participants. And so far, again, at the time of this recording, they haven't commented on this motion moving forward. So I'm wondering if they're not so excited or they're not so eager to go to an election either, and there might be something else at play here. Your thoughts on all of this political maneuvering?
Now that I think out loud, or at least in my head, if you hypothetically they oppose the prorogation and annul it, and then the bills that they had, I forget what the pending bills are, but there are some bills that I don't mind if they die. But instead of they're not going to get them passed in any event.
Including the capital gains tax that the CRA says they're moving forward, even though it hasn't gone through. Like,
yeah,
that's asinine.
No, and I've gotten some. Not that I can even handle these questions, but I've got people who are panicking, and basically accountants have no idea how this is going to apply and what the consequences are going to be.
Right.
I hadn't thought about this question.
Okay.
My initial reaction to say is at the end of the day, it doesn't make sense. They'll play politics with it. It doesn't make much of a difference. They'll play politics with it. Well, okay. What you vote non-confidence, dissolve, and then trigger an election? What's the time frame within which then you have to hold the election? 1 to 2 months?
Depending on the writ period they set, it could be as soon as a month after. So that would bring us in, like right now, if the House resumed on the 24th, let's say a week before a non-confidence vote by the opposition could be put in place. Let's say they lose it and that Jagmeet Singh doesn't turn around once again and decide to support the Liberals, we could be looking at a pre-writ period as early as April 10 or 15, something like that. Whereas now, if this case went forward, we could be looking at that in February. And again, all of this in the light of this new incoming presidency in the United States, asking to annex now with economic force Canada. Presumably, we have a lame duck prime minister now who's way past his expiry date, but even doesn't have the confidence of his own party. So we're in a weird position to have to negotiate with Mr. Trump here moving forward.
Can you imagine the people throwing hissy fits that Trump says he's going to use, quote, economic force, and they think that this guy just threatened to like murder their puppies or something? It's like, you know, when Joe Biden threatened to withhold $1 billion in aid, that was economic force. Every element of negotiation is use of economic force for the purposes of negotiating. I'm trying, you know, I don't know. I have to mull this over because I only want to think of the most sinister, nefarious things.
Dude, we can have you back. I know this is
you asked the question. I don't have confidence because I remember being skeptical of their annulment of the prorogation at the time. I said unanimous among 11, I think it was 11 Supreme Court justices there or whatever. That's not a good sign. I mean, there's very few things that are unanimous. You know, Trump not being struck from the ballot unanimous, but even within the unanimous, you had like diverging reasons as to why. Unanimity is not always a good thing. It sometimes shows political bias.
Yeah.
So I'm just looking up the criteria to annul prorogation. I'd be shocked if they even annulled it. I mean, it's sort of the Governor General's not discretion, but there's, you know, criteria to authorize prorogation. There have been questionable prorogations in the past in Canada. I want to remember what those were. One of them was
Stephen Harper.
That was it. One of them was Harper, and I forget what the controversy at the time was. Did they have to do some inquiries, and they didn't want them to go on any further?
Well, he was also facing a non-confidence vote.
So bottom line, the only question is from Trudeau's perspective.
Mm-hmm.
He is no more evil than Chrystia Freeland. Mark Carney, I don't know, but I'm going to go. He's pretty bad as well. I mean, these are all WEF stooges. It doesn't matter who. The only reason they're doing it, as far as I'm concerned, was to get past the delay for federal pensions, because from what I understood, it wasn't just Jagmeet Singh from the NDP, so they're doing all of their parliamentarians a favor. The Conservatives don't seem particularly hell-bent on getting to the bottom of certain political crises in Canada, because I think they're partly involved. And so everyone's just going to ride it out, play the politics. They'll come back in March, and then they'll either trigger a non-confidence then, or maybe Trudeau tries to structure a deal. But big deal. September, October, there's going to be an election anyhow. I mean, unless they're going to strategize some massive attack in the 3 months, and then they reconvene and Justin Trudeau holds on to power and suspends elections indefinitely like they did in Ukraine. We'll see. But to me, it doesn't matter. What's nice is watching the Liberal Party implode. What's nice is watching Jagmeet Singh. I hope get his ass handed to him. And in as much as I'm not much of a fan of the Conservatives and Pierre Poilievre, it'll certainly be a step, if not in the right direction, at least a cessation of a step in the wrong direction.
A slowdown of the wrong direction. You were saying that in your last video, guys. You can go check them out on YouTube. Let's get into that a little bit here. Just the idea of perhaps Trudeau invoking another Emergencies Act, as he did here for the bouncy castles during the Freedom Convoy. Now, Jarel Beaudoin was a senator and by all means the expert on constitutional law here in Canada. He taught me at the Faculty of Law in Ottawa.
Did he write the book? He wrote one of the treaties. I remember that name.
That's the one. And I have to admit though, this whole class was so monotonous. Like he would basically read from the book almost a whole semester. But what was interesting, at some point here, we had to debate the usage of the War Measures Act at that point by Trudeau Sr. in the 1970s in response to the FNQ, le Front de Libération du Québec, who had kidnapped these politicians. Now, people are suggesting that at the time was Trudeau's darkest hour, Trudeau Sr., and that now it could be possible here that Trudeau, Justin, could also, in the same way that he's maybe overstepped his power during the Freedom Convoy, find any other reasons right now, whether those are the churches that have been burning in Canada for the last 2 years, whether that's the Hamas protesters, whether that's the incoming threat of this supposed bird flu virus. He could have now suddenly the wherewithal to install another Emergencies Act, presumably thwarting even this prorogation and the deadlines imposed by it, and as well as the leadership race. Do you think at this point, the fact that he's still there, still kind of refusing to resign, he hasn't really resigned, that he would go to this measure? Is that even possible in your view, given what we know of Justin Trudeau in the last couple of years? Viva.
There's certain things I hate to even discuss because I don't want to put that energy out in the universe. It's not like the demons need me to give them any ideas. You know, the evil people. We know there's a wild demographic issue in Canada. There is an issue about student visas, and obviously there's a problem with vetting and verification, because a lot of the if terrorists are crossing from Canada into, or people on terror watch lists are crossing from Canada into the States, it means they're in Canada. It takes one horrendous incident. Every country has had one. And Justin Trudeau can invoke the Emergencies Act. Yeah, stay in power indefinitely, like they're doing in Ukraine. Just war measures, martial law, no elections. That I can see. But then, you know, that for 2 or 3 extra months, it's not like he's got to orchestrate that. So that is where it can go really dark. That was sort of, I was
suggesting if he wants to go past March here.
Go past March. Let me just touch wood. That is the concern that people had for the elections here. Like, how could they go to digital elections? Well, terror attack or a virus. How can they prevent inauguration? You got past certification. The next step is the transfer of power on the 20th.
Don't go too fast. We'll flip to American politics here in just a moment. So actually, let's get into that.
All that to say, by the way, in order, one does not need to be creative to understand what can foreseeably happen in Canada that would allow Trudeau to invoke the Emergencies Act. He already broke that glass prematurely once, and then the Rouleau said, "You did good, Trudeau." He'll feel empowered to do it a second time. I don't want to, God forbid, period. But you can all imagine very easily what might have to happen. Just one bad terrorist attack in Canada. Oh, then we can't even vote. Can't hold safe leadership elections. Can't hold safe voting for federal elections. Got to go to digital or text, whatever. Who the hell knows? And then that way they can find a way to prop the Liberals up. That's where it can go really dark. But let's.
Hence the quote: when you have an emergency that removes your civil liberties, government will continue to create emergencies to remove your civil liberties, right? And now that he's already done it, he could be empowered. And this is why I'm asking the question for Canadians who think, oh, we've got this, we won, he's resigning. I'm like, well, not so fast. He hasn't actually resigned.
But the bottom line, it doesn't matter if he does actually resign and they replace him with an interim lead. It doesn't matter. It's the same It's the same criminals behind this organization. So
Right.
if the issue, the question would be, how could the Liberals remain in power indefinitely? And if it's to suspend elections, well, then prorogation might delay that. But if that's the ultimate, if that's the ultimate play, you'll do it anyhow. So
Right. All right. Let's get into
Gulf of Mexico, Gulf of America, baby. Let's do this.
Of Mr. Trump here. So yes, so there's a couple of things on the radar. So it's not just Canada here. He seems to be looking at this more as a North American strategic union of sorts. And I say that for a couple of reasons. Well, one here, he wants to rename the Gulf of Mexico to the Gulf of America. He's putting pressure now also on Denmark through massive tariffs, he says here, to get control of Greenland. And more recently now, he's talking about using economic force here again to acquire Canada. So this is surpassing now the 25% tariffs that he was asking Trudeau and LeBlanc to fix in terms of the terrorists crossing the border into the United States. Now he's specifically talking about acquiring Canada, and he's talking about, for all intents and purposes, a security zone of sorts. I'll set up this clip here. People are asking his opinion on what Pierre Poilievre said about, no, we're not going to become the 51 states. And he kind of said, yeah, I don't really care what he says. He may or may not be elected. And here's the reason why I'm doing that. So I'll play that clip in a moment. But what are your thoughts here on the holistic approach of what perhaps Donald Trump is trying to do, and why Eric Trump on December 23rd put out this
freaking Greenland?
That too.
Yes, the video of him landing it. It looks beautiful, although I still prefer the greenery of Florida to the whitery of Greenland. But
me too. Me too. But here they were putting out a meme, which at that time was still kind of like a joke. Oh, Trump is Christmas shopping. He wants to buy Canada here on Amazon, Greenland, and the Panama Canal. But now it seems that there's more fuel to that fire. There's something there behind the whole situation. He's not just trolling Trudeau anymore as the governor.
He's not trolling. What he's doing is sort of tenderizing the meat, if you could put it like that. He doesn't, I gotta say this, it's not to be insulting again. Nobody in America wants all of Canada as the 51st state. You certainly don't want a province that wants to separate from the Federation to join you. Like, there's logistically, it's not a joke, but it's not something that you even want. So why do you propose something that you don't want? Because you want something less than that. What he's basically jostling for here,
or he wants something completely different that is not yet kind of seen.
I think he wants something of a North American coalition. I don't want to say like what's it called in Europe? The EU, not like the EU, because I don't think no nations want to sacrifice their independence for some oversight by a greater body that doesn't act in the best interest of the countries. He wants to basically soften this up for like something of a geographic NAFTA, and he's understanding where the strategic the threats are. The Panama Canal being a threat for illegal immigration. I'm not sure that it is the be all and end all, but it's a part of it. The terrorist national security threat coming out of Canada, and the international nuclear war threat that Greenland would be strategic in terms of crossing over through the Arctic. So what he wants to do is ask for more than anybody would like to give, knowing that they're not going to give that, so that when you say, okay, fine, I don't want to annex you, but let's have an agreement whereby things will be fair, whereby we'll have mutually agreed concessions, access to Greenland or whatever. Maybe we get a corridor. So he's just asking for more, and he's needling the parties so that they know, look, at the end of the day, Denmark can huff and puff all at once, but it's going to probably be in its best interest to come to an agreement, in as much as it will be for Canada as well. And Panama, that's a legit, they have the authority to take that by force if they want. So that might just be raising that awareness and making people realize, yeah, we didn't give it to you so that you can then use it as an invasion point of America. So that might be more of an imminent national security threat warranting some form of military intervention. But economic force, for goodness sake, it's called negotiations, and that's what he's doing. And it's phenomenal. It's fascinating.
Do you think also, on one hand, he might be trying to create some type of strategic economic union to defend against the growing threat here of the BRICS nations, who for the last number of years have been de-dollarizing and getting outside of this dollar matrix of international trade? And perhaps he's thinking that North American continents type of strategic alliance, as Kevin O'Leary's been saying on the news in the last couple of days, he's not talking about annexation with the United States, but some type of economic union of force of somehow. Could that be part of his mix also for Trump?
That's kind of what I mean by like a geographic NAFTA, which is, look, we're North America. We don't really need the resources from, let's just say, countries that we don't want to have to deal with. China, Saudi Arabia. Like, we don't need it. We've got more than enough here. And it's not a question of what's the word when the opposite, back in the 40s, 50s, when America was not non-interventionist. What's the word I'm looking for? It was the policy of being more national and not foreign interest. Jeez Louise, I'm just having a total brain.
Contrary to globalism.
Yeah, it's
protectionism. Protectionism.
Protectionism. No, isolationism. Sorry, isolationism. So this is not so much isolationism as like, well, let's make America an island to the world. This is now, okay, fine. We don't want to be reliant on clearly on Russia, on China, on Saudi Arabia, on Venezuela. So let's make a North American alliance. Ensure that we have access to travel through the Arctic, ensure that we have all the resources and access, and we'll have mutually beneficial agreements. That's what it is. And like, it's sort of like he's asking for more than he knows the other parties want to give, so that when they ultimately come to an agreement, everyone's going to feel like they made some concessions. And in the interim, he's giving a noogie to the little brother. Hey, Canada, you better stop sending us terrorists through your northern border. Otherwise, we will do something if we have to.
It's called the art of the deal for a reason. You're absolutely right.
It's economic force. My goodness, that economic force is what your employer does. What it says, do this, and I'll pay you. And if you don't do it, I won't pay you. And by the way, you can also
take the vaccine, or else we're going to put you on leave without pay.
That's just battery and assault, and that's something much different. That's you don't use economic force with God-given constitutional rights unless you're Justin Trudeau. But no, I don't. It's not that I don't make much of it. It's exactly what he did when he stepped down, when he came down that escalator back in the day and said they're sending the rapists, and you hyperbolic huff and puff, you get people up in a tizzy. But at the end of the day, everybody who is half intellectually honest knows that you don't mean what they say you mean, but also you start the discussion and you sensitize people to the problem. And lo and behold, people are now sensitized to the problem that Panama Canal is a problem. The border with Canada is a problem. And we might strategically want to start thinking about Greenland.
And I've been watching our friends and families comment on this, and I was watching the slant of the mainstream news, amusing again that Trump is either an idiot, he's stupid with all of these comments, or on the other side of things that he's just the Nazi we told you he was, and he's trying to take over.
Ask anybody who says that if they even bothered to watch the Joe Rogan podcast. Nobody could watch Trump on Rogan and then say that he's unintelligent. You have to be a liar or yourself too stupid to identify intelligence.
Right. So listen, we're 50 minutes in. I know we have a few minutes left here, and I want to get a few things under our belt here before we go. One of your thoughts on the inauguration. So in the last couple of months, a lot of people and researchers were suggesting that, maybe the outgoing presidency would be sabotaging this entry of Trump back into the power.
The only question is how.
Oh, yeah, I know. Well, again, we just had, as you said, the certification of his vote on January 6th. Do you think it moves forward without a glitch, or are they, as they seem to have been preparing here in the last couple of weeks, maybe ramping up also in the States for some type of emergency or War Measures Act, whether those are the drone attacks in New Jersey, the bird flu coming up, these national fires now that we're seeing outrageous on the West Coast? Do you think they're setting up for that, or do you think we make it unscathed here to January 20th in the United States? What do you say from your sunny Florida there?
Well, I say what Donald Trump says: you hope for the best and plan for the worst. I am I'm supposed to go to DC for the inauguration. I was supposed to go to DC for the anniversary of January 6th, but the weather prevented me from doing that. And I think I might get prevented from going for other family reasons on the 20th. I think it's going to go off the transfer of power without a glitch. I am very, very concerned that it seems like they've been astroturfing social consciousness to accept the idea that drones can fly wherever the hell they want, and there's nothing that the military in its infinite power can do about it. That makes me very concerned. The guy in Vegas who now the FBI confirms, if I believe, there's so many angles about this. The FBI confirms that the email he sent to the Sean Ryan podcast, which talked about drones, technology, all this stuff, you could hover one over the White House with an infinite payload and it's game over. Right. The FBI confirming that that's actually his email makes me very suspicious that it's not actually his email, and that It's intelligence trying to astroturf people to believe, oh yeah, that's true, that it's a real email, and now you should be afraid of drones in the sky doing things over the White House. So I'm skeptical.
Well, I'm totally with you. You don't have to go too far because I lost one of my 3 YouTube channels on the Hunter Biden laptop story. At the time, 51 intelligence agencies were telling us that this was mere Russian propaganda. Yet here we are years later where Biden was facing 17 years in jail and has now just been pardoned by his father, all for contents within the laptop. So again, trusting the FBI or 3-letter agencies at this point is
I want to show
Aaron. Yeah, go ahead.
Hold on. Where's this thing here? Bring it. Yeah, here we go. Look, I'm supposed to give these away. The Hunter Biden laptop. This will not get you in trouble, but you look through this. It's like a dirty magazine that's censored.
I know.
No, yeah, man. Now they've got their new 51 intelligence officers 2.0. They've got 17,000 doctors who say that RFK Jr. shouldn't be approved for HHS. It was very weird that they start trying to get you to believe that there's nothing the military can do about drones. And so
you were repeating that at the UAP conference, and
no, over and over. And I look, I've got friends in contacts. I'm like, within the Trump camp, this makes me very concerned because it's almost like they're trying to announce their inability to stop a drone strike. Like as far as an assassination attempt number 6 would go. So
exactly.
It makes me
7 now. Yeah.
It depends how many you count. I mean, at least we know it's 2 within the last, and we don't talk about that. We're just
right.
So I think the transfer of power, I think the inauguration happens. It's going to be cold and people are going to be deterred from going in the first place because of what happened 4 years ago. That's my concern is not what they're doing, like, for an immediate reaction. Just recall what they did the last time Trump won. They spent 6 months spying on his campaign, setting up Russiagate hoax, falsifying evidence. When they call that a peaceful transfer of power, I say that's as much political violence as anything. So I think they're doing something similar. I don't know what it is right now, but you have to assume they're up to no good, period. And you need to take it for granted and then try to protect against it. Trump's making some good picks. Where they're going to probably, I think where the risk really is just in terms of frustrating his ability to govern the way they did back in 2016. You get a couple of rhinos to hold back approving Kash Patel, RFK Jr., Bhattacharya, and frustrate his ability to govern if they don't try something more sinister. So there is no depth, however, to the depravity of the dying beast that is gasping for air, just trying not to pass. This is what the machine is right now.
And but I do why your voice and the alternative media voice is so important. And I watched you made a specific point, and I replayed it quite a few times on my show after the last election when Trump was declared the winner, that in this particular era of time where now we had censorship free to some extent Twitter and Rumble, we were able to report live in real time some of the criminality behind the scenes here of the election. And so speak about that right now too. You've to some extent, our main mandate here, your mandate, my mandate, even though we look at different aspects of things, is to fight just that, censorship. Where are you on that? Are you still cautiously optimistic? We saw the Zuckerbergs of the world just the other day. He's changing his rules now.
Zuckerberg's an interesting guy because he's predictably devious. So at the very least, you can gauge his responses, his behavior accordingly. You know what motivates him. It's not honesty, and it's not sincerity, and it's not principles. It's something. It's money and it's influence. And to the extent that you know what his motivating factors are, you can predict his behavior a little bit more. So you can't trust him, but you can predict the way he's going to behave. Right. I don't want to get you into trouble talking about the election stuff, but what we had confirmed in 2024 was how fortified 2020 was. And it's amazing. We did not have millions of ballots just roaming around to be dumped off at 2 a.m. to fill whatever differential needed to be filled in whatever swing state had that differential. I've always said it. Like I never got in trouble talking about the election stuff. I actually very rarely even got in trouble with COVID stuff. But I said I didn't believe the Dominion vote flipping, the ghost of Hugo Chavez stuff. I don't judge anybody for believing it because it's not impossible to believe. I just said it was a little more, I always thought it was more straightforward. Endless ballots. And now that I understand exactly how they do it, they'll count and count and count, and they'll just pull up bags of what they need in order to beat the difference. It's what they did in 2020 because they had endless ballots. They didn't have them this time.
And they had endless amount of time. They stopped counting. Exactly. Yeah.
Endless and no oversight. You could not. Rumble was there, but Rumble wasn't what it is today. No. And Twitter was not what it is today. So It was amazing. We had, in as much as we are the media, we are also law enforcement. And I'm not saying that's myself in particular. You have the Scott Presslers of the world on the ground, the Jack Posobics on the ground in real time without censorship on Twitter. It's what allowed the election to be run fairly, or at least beyond the margins of cheating. So, no, I'm
perhaps
I'm
moving forward, also the peaceful transition of power, and also
That's
the implementation of the policy that was given to Trump as a mandate.
Well, at the very least, also accountability for the rhinos as well. Like when Trump appointed Chad Cronister, and I'd like to say I was not integral, but I was certainly vocal with that. And you get it's the transparency leads to accountability, and so you had Cronister withdraw because his sins of the past were put on blast and can't get away from them. So I'm very optimistic in general, and I'm also more optimistic. Like we've gotten to the point now where it's beyond one person. Also, like the first assassination attempt on Trump in Butler, Pennsylvania, was so critical because he hadn't picked his VP, he hadn't been formally confirmed by the RNC, and he hadn't won the election yet. The world is so different now. Not that he's got to protect himself at all costs.
Right.
It's just that it's not like, okay, Nikki Haley doesn't come in here and then you got your uni party rejoicing once again. So the inauguration, the deep state are in a panic mode, but at this point I think it's jump ship and scatter. And the only question is, who does Biden pardon on the way out? I've made some bold predictions which have come true, and I've made some bold ones which haven't yet. That Biden was going to resign, Kamala was going to become the 47th.
Hasn't happened yet, and I think we're running out of time for that.
We're down, dude. I've got a bet on predicted. We're definitely running out of time. But I know I did say not humorously. I think he's going to issue blanket pardons for FBI agents.
I think so too.
And because the FBI, or at least the nefarious players in the FBI, they know there's nothing stopping now. The new administration, and they've got to come clean, like Zuckerberg is doing. Try to blame it on somebody else, which I'm sure they'll do,
or burn the evidence.
Well, I'm sure they're doing that now. Dude, that white pillar of smoke coming out of the White House, where you got black pillars of smoke coming out of the FBI buildings, whatever the 7th floor.
I thought they were choosing a new pope, but anyways.
Yeah. I think right now, I think it's really minimize the damage, scatter, and then reconvene and try to do something in 2022. I don't think they're going to go full black swan, and I think also the fact that there's so much scrutiny. The pipe bomber, if there's another pipe bomber on is not going to waltz off into the sunset. And so the power of Twitter, the power of Rumble, the power of the voices now. And I don't, truth tellers always seems like a bit of a lofty way of the power of independent media who are uncorrupted, not uncorruptible, and some of them might be, corrupted, but it does not allow them to get away with what they had gotten away with for decades. And so it's a new ball game. I'm just for the inauguration. I was talking with Robert Barnes. We have our Sunday show, and he's like, "Look, it'll probably be quiet. A lot of people are going to be deterred from going to DC because of what they did in on January 6th. It's cold, it's miserable. You're going to a city that 95% of the people hate everyone coming down on the city for Trump. So I think it'll be, God willing, uneventful, but the most monumental. It is the monumental comeback already, but." I think it's going to be more clandestine what they're going to try to do to undermine the Trump presidency. I do have, legally speaking, a concern that they might try to. Sentencing is tomorrow. That's right, with Merchant.
The 10th. Exactly. And the court refuted his last attempt to.
They dismissed the motion to stay the sentencing. So I think Merchant's going to give him some bogus conviction that's going to be non-eventful from no jail, whatever. But it's going to confirm him as a convicted felon. And I have a feeling that maybe the Ratskins of the world, Jamie Ratskin, is going to say, now he's officially a convicted felon, so we can impeach him because now he actually has a crime under the high crimes and misdemeanors. Maybe they'll try for an impeachment 3.0.
There still might be a legal option there for them.
Yeah, that, what else? There's, we're already past the point of certification. So you remember when Jamie Ratskin said, we're going to have to disqualify him and they're going to talk to an angry mob and it's going to be civil war conditions. So we're past that. I think a lot of people are getting wise, but only for self-preservation. And I do think Biden's going to hand out pardons like it's candy.
I saw a lot of long faces today at the Carter funeral, so things are not going well.
Well, did you see? You saw Trump and Obama like yucking it up. Like I got to do an audio overlay of that because I have jokes about what he said.
I saw a really good one about Big Mike, and the story was Big Mike.
Oh shit! Well, that was my joke. Okay, so never mind. No matter how funny and smart I think I am, someone is funnier and smarter and faster.
Man,
it's good. But there's one thing. I love how Obama is sitting there laughing it up with Hitler, Orange Hitler himself. I mean, these people are such a bunch of godforsaken hypocrites. They painted out Trump to be Satan incarnate. You got Biden with the grin from ear to ear when they meet at the White House. They knew it was a lie all along. And I can tell you, Trump is a good man, because if he weren't a good man, they wouldn't be trying so hard.
I'm with you on that, Viva. I'm with you on that, Viva. Okay. So first of all, we're at the end of our hour here, and I know you have to go. You had a hard exit. I did want to talk to you about Tamara Lynch. Her sentencing is coming up, I believe, on March 12 or 22. At any rate, can I have you back on so we can discuss?
Yeah, for sure. Okay. Well, let's do it after, because
sure.
I'm skeptical if they're not going to sentence her to anything more than time served, and if they do,
I think time served is already way too much for this misdemeanor.
No, I know, but they did the same thing with Artur Pavlovsky. Like they can't if they don't give time served, it almost like undermines what they did, the injustice that they perpetrated against them in the first place. So
at that point, it's just political persecution for everyone to see. Exactly. Viva, before we go, how can people support you here on your locals channel?
Well, really you can get merch at Viva Frei. No, I'm Viva Frei everywhere on the internet, and if you just put that into the search engine, you'll get some funny stuff. All safe for work. vivabarneslaw.locals.com is where we got to update that picture a little bit. Is where we have the best above average law community out there, and it's a wonderful community.
Amazing conversations and analysis.
Yeah, it's amazing. And 90% of the stuff is not behind a paywall, but this is where people can support us if they want. And that's it. Otherwise, Rumble, Viva Frei, Twitter, the Viva Frei. Though fair warning, I swear quite a bit on Twitter now because I've had it with these. I've had it with the people. I'm calling them retarded when they act retarded, and I'm telling them to go fuck off when they need to be told to go fuck off. Barnes told me sometimes you need to cuss the people that need cussing, so I've internalized that.
Okay, I can't wait to have you back on, Viva. Thank you so much for your time. I want to ask you this before we go. We are living in a crazy time where the rapid rate of change is accelerating. A lot of our audience members are having trouble coping with that. You and I, to some extent, are having trouble coping with the news cycle, getting on top of this, disseminating, breaking this down for the audience. It's getting harder and harder to do on a daily basis. But for the people out there watching us and who are trying to convey some of this information to their family members who might still not be awake to all of this stuff, and who are a little bit long in the tooth in this long war, you're still having the long hair here because we're not there yet at the finish line. What would you give as advice to people moving forward here on this crazy rapid rate of change in our world? And what do you see as optimism here on the other side of that, Viva?
We have democratized information, and it's quite clearly it's the death throes of a dying empire, a dying evil empire. So that's the optimism. The populism, which has been depicted as a bad word, is actually, it's a good thing, and it's seeing a resurgence like it's never seen before. Dealing with the news cycle, I'm probably the worst person to give advice on this because I obsess over it, and I'm constantly in a state of mild manic,
panic.
Yeah, it's like you can't. I have dreams of Justin Trudeau. I'm telling you. Oh, my kid's back. So the two things. The one advice is, check before you retweet. It happens to all of us. The information is so rapid. Yeah. Well, and also sometimes it's impossible to verify what's accurate and what's not. So deal with everything with a degree of skepticism. You have to hope for the best, plan for the worst. But at the point, it has never looked so optimistic as it has now. There's a reinvigoration. There's a rebirth of populism in the good sense. People know who they can trust and who they can't. And those bastards that have been, thinking that they can be the gatekeepers of truth and everything, know that they're at the end of their road. And that is why they are lashing out in the way that they are. So, the Faucis of the world, their time is coming to an end. The Bidens of the world, and those regimes are coming to an end. And it's why they have to now, full panic mode, but full treat themselves as heroes mode, because they know their time has come to an end. all the same thing I always say: never resort to violence. Period. And be careful in terms of even what you say to people online, because you don't want to. You resort to violence, all that you end up doing is giving them an excuse to do what they want to do in the first place. And if you act in a way that is over a certain threshold of civility, you allow the abusers to claim to be the victims. And so, but endless mockery, and put everything on blast, itemize it, document it, and mock them shamelessly, because there's a reason why, the king always killed the jester first, because the jester can make jokes, but if you get a little bit too truthful in your jokes, then that's when you get into trouble. Mock them endlessly because they deserve it.
I love it. Thank you so much, folks. That was the one and only Viva Frei. You can find him, of course, on his Twitter. His links are in the description box below. This was my special report today here for January 9th. And please join me this evening again for the Beyond the News edition of the Breaking News. That's going to be at 8 o'clock Eastern here on Rumble. Thank you so much, everyone, for watching. Thank you, Viva, for being here. And look forward to having our next conversation. Have a great evening, folks.
You too.